Brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. Informed by science. Guided by insight. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.
Welcome to another really interesting episode of Honest Money. We're talking about something that's very close to a lot of our hearts in South Africa, which is property, and maybe more specifically around buying a property and how we do that. And although I've done that in my life, I'm surely not a person that's got a huge amount of experience in it. So I needed to bring in some heavyweight expertise to help me with this, and I'm so thrilled to have Frugal Local with us on the show again. Frugal, thanks so much for joining.
Hi, Warren. Thank you so much for having me.
A little bit of background, I guess, for our listeners. I mean, I'm someone that doesn't advocate a lot of physical property as investments. I do believe we should all own our homes if we're going to stay in them for longish periods of time. And for me, I'm not putting words in your mouth, Frugal, but it's mine. But around 8 years or longer, I haven't ever done a sum where owning a property. Or let me say, renting a property for 8 years or longer makes sense. It always makes sense to me to own it for that kind of time frame or longer. And my role model always is going to be the other Warren, the real Warren, Warren Buffett, who's lived in his house for 50 years or something by now. I know you've got different views, and that's the lovely thing about the world of money, is that we're not in the space of having to do everything one particular way, and there isn't only one answer. So I know you've got a much stronger view in property than me, which is great to have you on the show, and I appreciate you sharing your insights with us.
Awesome, yeah, thank you so much. I think I think that ideally, and I think the 8-year mark is, I think, fairly accurate as well, especially if it's your primary residence. I think that there's a big culture in South Africa of saying, I want to own the home I live in. But I mean, I was actually renting out my properties for a very long time, and I was actually renting because I could rent for cheaper than I could buy. And I would literally just have tenants in my other properties that were willing to pay the large amounts. And once I actually reached that point where it was actually cheaper for me to live in one of my properties, I actually moved into one of my properties, actually. So I know it's a bit of mixing pleasure and business there, but I do think that, we shouldn't be too hasty to just go and look, oh my goodness, here's a property, let's buy it.
Okay, so let's kick off. I think that's a nice start. So a typical journey for all of us is we get to the point where we decide it's time to go from being a renter to a buyer, and you just said it's not ideal just to kind of walk into the first property and make them an offer. So how do we go about that? What's the right way to start a process like this?
So, Warren, I think you might know as well that, you wouldn't really, if you had an investment, let's say you've got R1 million that you've got to invest, you wouldn't just randomly go and say like, oh, okay, I'm going to buy this stock. You don't do that. You do a lot of research. You think about things. You go and research the area, what the company do, the financial statements. You read what the news is saying, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into that before you actually start buying. Or even actually go and look for properties. So I think it's very important that people know that it's not just I go and buy property. For me, the first step is actually checking out that your finances are stable and that your finances are okay. So if you're able to buy cash, well done on you. It doesn't happen often, but most of the people are going to need a bond. And if you're going to need a bond, you're going to have to make sure that your credit score is good, that you are up to date with all of your debt repayments, that you do have some deposits saved and all of that. But I think the most important thing is just making sure that your finances are okay. You've got a bit saved and you're not living on the edge of your salary. Because if you do, then obviously, and you're going to try and make an offer, and you're not going to get a bond, you're not going to be able to pay all the costs and all of that.
And I mean, I think that that homework and that research is key. It's especially, I think, if you're making a commitment to any asset, and a property in particular, where it's going to be a long, many years holding, and you've got all the costs of buying it. The last thing you want to do is pay all those costs of getting in, and then 2 years later realize you've made a horrible mistake because the area is dying around you, or something's gone wrong, whatever it is. So I think doing the homework is really key. I agree with you 100%. I'm not convinced that we need to do the homework to say that we all need to become property trend experts and demographic experts about where cities are moving and all of that. But you can do a little bit of homework around what are the kind of transport nodes around you. How easy is it to get to and from where you stay? Because transport's important. If you're close to good schools, that's going to be a huge advantage. That's always, I think, a driver of property prices. Is there sort of decent shopping? I know most of us can shop online, but still, we all like to get into the malls and easy access to highways and the like. All of those things are factors. I'm not saying look for the very perfect property. That doesn't exist. But surely, some of those are important factors, and the more of those kinds of boxes you can tick, the better. But then, to your point, Frugal, making sure that you've got the money. It sounds like such a basic thing to say, such a simple thing to say, but it's a step that I think a lot of people get wrong because they don't think about the fact that they've got to pay insurance, that whether it's on their goods or on the whole building, whether it's levies that they're going to pay for the body corporate if they're staying in an apartment. Their own bond repayment costs, but they still got to keep saving and they still got to keep accumulating money. And I think it's it sounds so boring. You got to do a budget, but gee, this is one time you really need to do a budget.
No, absolutely. I normally tell people a story like this. So when you buy a car, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm buying this amazing car, but what happens when the tires go? You're going to need to take that car in for a service. What happens if it's a major service or a Campbell service? You're also going to need, like you've mentioned, you need insurance. You also need to put in petrol in your car. Now, buying a property is similar to that. Yes, you're buying the property, but what about the pool? The pool needs maintenance. If you've got grass, you're going to need to keep that cut. So you're going to need either garden services or a lawnmower or things like that. You also need to make sure that the property is maintained. So it's going to need a paint job. You're probably going to need homeowners cover. Many of the, when you get a bond, if it's not in sectional title, you're going to need property insurance. You're going to need that. In sectional title, generally, it is included in the levies. But there's all of these things and all of these costs. So a rule of thumb, I think, for people that want to buy their first property is to take a year or two and literally put that amount away that it's going to take to actually, that they would be actually repaying on all those things. So, for example, if they know that their bond is, 10,000 Rand, it's going to be 2,000 Rand about for insurance, for argument's sake, and this much for this. Put that money away every month for 2 years. It gets you into the habit of actually paying that money. Don't just go and randomly buy it, because if you now have 2 years, you've got the habit formed already. And now after 2 years, you have a deposit or, some money for the bond and transfer costs. So that's what I recommend. Start early and create the habit already. So when that point comes and you're like buying, that it's not going to be a shocker in your budget.
And I think maybe one extra thing which certainly caught me out the first time I bought a property, and like everyone, it was tight when I needed to start that exercise of did I have enough money, etc. And the thing that really caught me out was sort of 4 months in. It was an apartment, and the body corporate said, we haven't really set aside money for the last 10 years for painting and waterproofing and the like. And so, your levies are normally 2,000, but we've decided, at an AGM, which I wasn't part of because it was, 12 months before, 8 months before, we're now implementing a special levy, and it's now going from 2,000 to 4,000. And I think that's something, that you need to be aware of if you're buying a property where it is sectional title, and just the jargon around that means, you might think it's all good and well because someone's responsible for the painting of the whole place outside and maintaining the roof and all that. But actually, you are a part owner of all of that, and that also means you're partly responsible. And unfortunately, a lot of body corporates are not well managed in South Africa. There are lots of people who think paying levies is a kind of an optional thing, and if you're having a tough month, you can just postpone your levy payment, which is totally wrong. But you need to know that if the body corporate's not in a healthy position and a lot of the tenants aren't paying their levies, then buying into that might be a huge disaster, because they're not going to have the money to maintain the place. When you want to sell one day, people are going to be driving in looking at this place that looks absolutely awful on the outside, despite the fact that you might be a brilliant owner inside and have done everything you need inside, you can't paint the place outside if it's a huge block of apartments. So for me, that was one real painful lesson early in my property career, was make sure that the body corporate is healthy if you're buying apartments, which I guess is going to be a lot of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think I'm going to make a comment on this, and I think this is a very good tip to the listeners. So when I buy property in sectional title, there's a couple of things that I look for, especially like most of the property. Number one, I look how the place looks on the outside. If the place is falling apart, and I'm talking about the gardens aren't kept, the paint is peeling off, if the lifts aren't working, whatever, like things like that, then I know there's problems in the finances. If they don't have people looking after the gardens, there's issues with the money in that complex. And then I'm very, very careful not to buy there. Then I wouldn't buy there. And I've seen it over and over again. I didn't learn the hard way. I had a mentor that actually taught me this. I think the second thing is that as soon as you've got the money and you know that you're financially solid, you've checked your credit your credit score, you've got your deposit and all of that. Once you've got a place and you want to sign the papers, I want to make an offer on it. Add a clause that says that you want to see the financial statements of the block, whether it's a homeowners association or whether it's a sectional title scheme. You can say, give me all of your financial statements over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, or whatever the case might be, and give me 7 days to check through it. And then I can decide in that 7 days, I can still cancel it, because I want to make sure that I'm actually buying into something that's healthy.
Gee, that's actually a fantastic point, and also don't feel pressurized. If the agent says to you, "Well, you're not going to get this deal if you put in that 7-day clause," or if they say to you, "Well, this is a desperate seller, this is the deal of a lifetime," there are many deals of a lifetime in the property market. Patience is always going to be more valuable than than kind of high emotion pressure selling. So I think just one of my tips would also be take someone with who's not involved in the whole conversation, someone you trust who's kind of just level-headed, a little bit financially savvy, and just get them to be there as kind of your, it's almost like your running buddy, your exercise buddy. It's your thinking buddy, someone that just kind of holds it to account to say, hang on, maybe you're not thinking this through properly, or just take a second, take a moment. Let's give it a day. Let's think about it, and then let's make the call.
Absolutely. So my wife, as you might know, Mrs. Frugal, she's an interior architect. So she works with property and all of the interiors and the things every day. So when she walks into a property with me, she knows. She's I know the rental market. I know working with tenants. I know a little bit about that, but she walks into the property and she says, listen, this is a lot of money that we're going to have to spend to actually fix up this place. She knows. So as my best friend is in construction, I sometimes invite him along as well and say, please come and have a look, because we miss things. And as you've mentioned, somebody telling you this is the deal of a lifetime, I want to tell you this following line, and this is part of my life. This is who I am very much. It's a frugal thing. It says, I am a shopper, but I'm not a buyer. I only buy when it's worth it for me and when it suits my needs and what I'm looking for. So a lot of people say, listen, I'm a buyer, I'm going to buy a property. Don't do that. Don't do that. You go and look at all the properties, and when you find the property that suits your budget, your needs, what you're looking for, and everything, then you start negotiating on the price and making sure on that. Don't just go and say, I'm in the market for a property, and then go buy a property. Don't do that. It's not wise.
Yeah, it's actually that's a lovely line. I like that. I might steal that every now and then, but I promise to give you credit. I think I can't think of anybody that's ever said, gee, I wish I hadn't done so much research or homework on an investment before I bought it, irrespective of what the investment is. So, doing your homework, being prepared, and understanding as much as you possibly can is so empowering. It's the one advantage you've got over everybody else, is most people are impulsive. Most people just want to, get the thing done as fast as possible, and they prize convenience over effort. And so, if you put in the effort, if you understand what you're doing as much as you possibly can, that gives you a massive advantage. And I think, and that applies to property as well as to any other investment out there. So do your homework. Frugal, I think I wanted to kind of just touch on a little bit around the things that are always going to kind of surprise people. So one of them will be, fortunately or unfortunately, in the property world, we have to involve lawyers. And so I just want to talk a little about that. How do lawyers get involved? Who pays them? What are they going to cost us?
I think in short, a small fortune. So it's one of those things. I think when we talk about stocks and bonds, or a financial advisor, there's fees, and everybody wants their cut. And I think if you've got a good deal, you're more than willing to let people take their fee. In the same with the property industry. So once you've got an offer to purchase that's signed, you're going to need to show that you can afford the property or that you're going to get money for it, which is either a bond or cash. And then it needs to go to two different attorneys. So the first attorney is the transfer attorney. The transfer attorney is somebody that the seller or the seller's agent generally will appoint. And that is somebody that's going to handle the transfer from that person to you. The other one is the bond attorney. If you've got a bond, you're going to need a bond attorney as well. So it's a very complicated calculation, actually, with regards to how this is worked out. I generally tend to say, from my experience, roughly budget between 10 and 20%. I've not seen it. I've seen people below 10. I've seen people at 20%, especially because the municipality, there's fees for municipality fees that you need to pay. Oftentimes you need to pay 3 months levies in advance. So there's a lot of fees like that. And that you need to pay over to the attorney, and then the attorney fees as well. So something just to take note of is transfer duties that is payable to SARS, because the government loves it when you buy property, expensive property. I believe at the moment it's over 1 million rand. Then you need to pay transfer duties as well, which is working on a sliding scale, a base rate and a sliding scale. There's lots of calculators on the internet that'll give you a base of that. I don't believe that you should take that as perfect. I think you need to add at least about, I would say, 5,000 to 10,000 rand on top of those fees. As I've just seen that a lot of those calculators will give you the base rate as such, but there's oftentimes other hidden fees that they don't tell you about.
So let's just break that down slightly. So that 10 to 20% that you're talking about that's not just for the lawyers. That's saying if you're going to spend R1 million on a property, budget somewhere around 100 to 200,000 rand extra, which is then going to cover all of these costs collectively.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've seen for a 400,000 rand property, about 40,000 rand, 45,000. For R1 million property, I've seen anywhere between 60 and 120,000 rand. That's what I've seen. I have seen less. I have seen a lot less. But depending on the area and the attorneys that you use. Oh, by the way, please ask your attorney for a discount. If you don't ask, you don't get. I have actually asked them, and I have received massive discounts, like 50% plus on their fees, because I asked.
That's a good tip, Frugal. I guess partly also because you're a property baron, so they need to keep you happy because they're going to get many more deals from you. What about the bond attorney? Who finds that? Is that me as the buyer, or who decides who the bond attorney is?
So you as the buyer needs to pay the transfer attorney as well as the bond attorney. So basically, because you're buying that property, you need to pay all of the fees. And that's generally how it works. I've seen negotiations where you're saying, that the seller does spend a part of it, but again, it just eats into some of their tax and it becomes really complicated. So generally what I've seen in the deals is that obviously if I'm getting the bond, then I need to pay for the bond attorneys. And also just remember there's a fee. It's generally between, I think the cheapest I've seen is about 4,700 rand, which is called a bond initiation fee, which they add onto your bond. Sometimes it can be more. I've had a shocker of a quote from one of the banks the other day. So it can be a lot more, but that is one fee. And then obviously the bond attorney that you need to fund. So that's what I'm saying. If you rather have a little bit more disposable cash available in case those fees go out of hand, and sometimes they are a little bit insane, and I have been trying a couple of times on some of them. So it's best then to say, listen, I've got a bit of extra cash, and if you do have that extra cash and you do see that, you didn't pay all of that money for your bond and your transfer attorneys, take that money and put it in your bond. You're going to save an interest and you're going to pay for your property faster.
Yeah. I think that's such a power point. Rather have a bit of extra cash that you're dropping into the bond, and it starts helping you kind of for the future emergencies that you can just prepare for. And maybe also, which we haven't really touched on, is, when you do all your calculations, try and start with a bit of an extra deposit into that bond, so that you're just starting on the front foot. You're not absolutely at kind of the limit all the time. If you can put a little bit of a deposit down, I guess it's obvious, but let me say it. The bigger the deposit, the better. But even if you don't, let's say it's R1 million property and they give you R1 million bond. If the bank does that, I don't know if they still do. And you can put down 200,000 or 300,000 rand. That's an extra payment that you're keeping in that bond. So even though the bond is worth R1 million, you're not paying interest on R1 million anymore. You're paying interest on 700,000 as an example, and all of that works in your favor in terms of less interest, shorter time period to get the bond out of your life, and that should be a focus. Once you're up and running, I can't. In my head, I never get it right to say, if prime is at 9.5%, that I take, the full 20 years to pay off interest at 9.5% for a property that's not generating an income. If it's my own, I want to get that bond out of my life as fast as possible. I don't want the bank to kind of be in control of me.
This is it. Remember, you're going to pay about 2.5 times the property value over 20 years. 2.6, depending on the interest and all of that. Around about 2.6%, I think, is a good measure. And you don't want to give them, the bank, any more money than what they do. So for this reason, I just want to give one or two tips, if I may, with regards to negotiation for a bond. Remember, a lot of people, what they'll be like, please, can I have a bond? But you can negotiate back with a bond. So back to the bank, one of the ways that you can do that is through a deposit. You can get a lower interest rate if you put down a deposit. So what I tend to do is I say, hi, I'd like to get a full loan. And then if they don't give me a full loan, I do have the money to put towards it. If I do get a full loan, I say, can we negotiate back with this amount if I put this amount down as a deposit? And generally what the bank will do is they'll say, listen, we'll better your interest rates. So, and remember, lower interest rates for you means you pay less interest to the bank, which means more money in your as disposable income. And then with that money, you can just, that extra bit of money, just put that into your bond every month. And like you say, because your primary residence doesn't actually generate you money, rather just get it out, paid off as soon as you can.
Yeah, I must say, my wife and I, she's the spreadsheet queen. When we got that bond out of our lives, I think it took us 6 years to pay our bond, and that was a real celebration, because the next day thereafter, that we knew that money that we were putting into the bond we could use to add to our savings. We definitely used a bit of that bond repayment money to pay for holidays, and it's such an amazing feeling when you've got a paid off property that's yours. And you've got the cash flow to kind of control your life, and I think that's an important thing in this whole thing. Is it's great to buy property. I think I do, as we said at the start, owning a home that you're going to live in for a long period of time makes all the sense in the world to me. Having a lot of debt for a long period of time doesn't. So do the calculations, do the homework, and then agree if you're in a partnership, in a marriage, whatever it is, that you are going to get this as a goal to kind of get yourselves debt free as fast as possible without being crazy. I'm not saying don't live life, but make this one of your big priorities.
Absolutely. And I think one story that I can tell is that me and my wife, we rented from landlords for the first about 6 years of our marriage, 7 years of our marriage. And it taught us a lot about how the rental market worked. But the one thing that's amazing now is that I was telling my wife, now, it's our, can we call it an anniversary of where we're staying now? We're staying in our own property and we're not getting a rental increase. It's so amazing that we're saying, I don't have to now pay more money every month to a landlord. I mean, there's a warm and fuzzy feeling with that. But I just want to mention something else here now as well, because people might say, oh my goodness, it's like, so I'm just going to go and buy a property. I think what we need to realize is that we need to buy what we need. We don't need to buy more than what we need. And a lot of times we'll say, I want a 5-bedroom home. I want a pool. I want this. I want this. I want that. And eventually what happens is that we basically get a white elephant. We've got, we're 2 people, we're 3 now at the moment, but let's say, a couple, and then they buy this 5-bedroom home, and then they've got literally storage for more stuff, and they literally just get more and more and more stuff that they actually don't need. And they don't even go into those rooms, but it's just storage space for more stuff that they actually don't. I mean, they don't even enter those rooms in 5 years. So rather, when you buy a property, just buy what you need. If you know that you're looking for a family, okay, that's great, but, maybe an extra bedroom, but don't just go and buy 5 bedrooms if you're thinking of maybe just having 1 kid. Buy what you need and take that money and spend it on things that's important, whether that's experiences, whether it's investments, whether it's traveling to Spain for a walk, the Camino or something. Do spend the money on things that's valuable to you and just buy what you need. Don't go and overspend on things that's not that important.
I think that's a absolutely powerful point, and I think it's a great concluding point. Frugal, we burn through our time as always when you and I are on these. We've got so much to talk about, and so I just want to tell our listeners, look out for Frugal Local on social media as well. He provides fantastic content. As I said, we don't necessarily do grow and invest our money in exactly the same way, and that's the beauty about the world of money is. There are many ways to do this, and I think the more you can educate yourself about all the different ways, the right ways, not the dodgy ones, the better. So Frugal Local, thanks so much for joining and for being so willing to share.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really, really great experience as always.
Brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. Informed by science, guided by insight. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.